everyone. I'm Morgan Lomley. I'm the facilitator for the Erie Landfill Task Force. This is the 5th meeting of this task force, and we've made significant progress in getting to where we are. We'll share a lot of the progress that we're looking for feedback on in terms of recommendations today. I'll get into our meeting agenda and our objectives in just a second. Can someone start the PowerPoint slides, please?
I think we need this TV turned on too.
Yep, and then we need the TV. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Is it on? No? And we'll need help getting the big TV on too. And while we're doing that, welcome to members of the public for joining us again. I see familiar faces, and if you've been here before, please help we have beverages and treats in the back. Please help yourself. They're for everyone. For members of the public here in person, we also have comment cards. So we invite any comments you have on the recommendations, on the process in general, thoughts that we may not have considered. Those comment cards are on little clipboards in the back. So now in the meeting afterwards, please feel welcome to fill those out and hand them to someone from the facilitation team, myself or Colin Johnson. And thank you again. Who from the public has been here all 5 meetings? Yeah, I thought so. You were. Well, good. Thank you so much. It's important to have the visibility and just the transparency, and we're glad you're here. Okay, so with that, we'll get started. This is our 5th meeting, our 5th of hopefully 6 meetings, and I need a clicker.
I think it looks like that's a PDF. Someone's gonna have to sit there. Okay.
All right, thank you. Next slide. Our agenda today, we'll go through some of the process pieces that are important to this process that we've been through before that aren't new. We'll welcome folks, ask you to introduce yourself. I'll go over the agenda and our objectives for our meeting today. We will review together the public comments that we've received between the last meeting and today. We have 6 or 7 of those, and they do inform our process, and we expect that you come to the meeting having reflected on those as well. We have 2 draft recommendations to review, and process-wise, these are not final. They are draft, and the goal of sharing with them with you today is to make sure that we're not missing anything or that we're getting the details right. And these will be summarized in a recommendations document that will be shared with you all before the recommendations go to council. So today's not the last time we're seeing them, but this is the same process we went through with the entrance recommendation. And then we'll have a conversation around community benefits. So my hope is we have time for you all to get out of your seats and work in small groups to brainstorm some community benefits. And there are a number that have been listed in many of the public documents you've seen: an apiary, solar panels, the list is long, but it's important to the task force process that they come from you all. So we're going to ask you to chat amongst yourselves for a few minutes, think about some community benefits, and we'll go through a little exercise where we ask you to prioritize those, reflect on what might also resonate with your neighbors and your communities, and that will form the draft of our community benefits recommendation, which is the last big piece of this process. And that's it for our agenda today. We have a couple of presentations sprinkled in from Weaver and Waste Connections as well, and some visuals that respond to action items that we came up with at the 4th meeting. Next slide. Objectives for today, I'll share it again. Understand the public comments that were received in the last month or so. We'll hopefully finalize the hauling route recommendation, finalize a land use recommendation. And by finalize, we mean finalize the draft language that we'll use in the recommendations document, and then we'll discuss the community benefits. Next slide. Let's do introductions. I'd like to ask the task force to introduce yourselves and mention the neighborhood that you represent as well. We'll start with Cheryl.
Cheryl Ellis, and I represent Road 6.
Cassie Yale, Vista Point.
Lisa Huff, Erie Highlands.
Sherry Kuntz, Vista Ridge.
Scott Wood, Vista Ridge.
Christina Schust, Ranch Eggs.
Jeff Deacon, Vista Ridge.
Great, thank you. And Michael joining us on Zoom.
Yeah, Michael Howard, Erie Highlands.
Thank you, Michael. I'll ask members, or staff from the town of Erie to introduce themselves. David?
Is with us in spirit if she chooses to speak from the heavens. She's behind the scenes running all of the AV equipment.
And David modeled how when we speak into our microphones. So they're all in front of you. And for folks joining virtually who are listening in on the task force conversations, they wish to hear too. So talk into your mic when you can, or because you have one. And then Waste Connection staff, if I might introduce you only because none of you are close to a mic, but we have Mark Adams, who's engineering manager with Waste Connections. We have Dalton Ellis, regional engineer, Randy Torville, district manager, Randy, and Jason Edwards from Weaver, a consultant to Waste Connections. And again, thank you to members of the public for joining us, and we're happy to have you here. Next slide. Next slide. Meeting participation guidelines. We've all been, in my view, very collaborative and very open to listening and working on these recommendations together. So as a reminder, we're all going to remain open-minded. We will interact respectfully with each other. We'll try to stay on track with the agenda. If we get off track with the agenda, we'll either set aside items in our parking lot or we'll decide as a group whether to spend more time on that over other items. We're participating in an active and focused manner. We're committed to the success of this process. We'll share our perspectives, values, and interests, not our positions. And you've heard me say it, if I hear positions, I'm going to help us reframe those as interests. And that's the basis of our collaboration and our recommendations. We'll strive to listen actively. We'll avoid repeating what have been through before unless you feel like you haven't been heard. And I would ask you to share that you haven't been heard or you don't see what you've shared in the recommendations. That's important, but we won't go back on what we've resolved as a group already. And when you are making recommendations, make them clear and specific. That helps us all get to those interests and refine the recommendations together. Next slide. We had some action items at our fourth meeting. I will go through these just so you understand their status. Number one was develop simulations of different geomorphic scenarios and feasibility options for filling the horseshoe-shaped notch. And those will be shared. We have images to share today. Then photo simulations of the current permitted and proposed changes to the permitted landfill area. Same, those are developed in your slide deck, and Jason Edwards will share those, or someone from Waste Connections. Meet with engineers from the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission to discuss managing that abandoned gas well that is in that horseshoe-shaped notch on the west side. We'll discuss that today. David has information to share. Prepare a model describing potential future traffic conditions with suggested hauling routes along Erie Parkway. So as a reminder, the group is conscientious of if we have a different entrance, if the landfill has different suggested routes that could impact traffic patterns. The spirit of that was, can the town adapt to updating, improving infrastructure so that safety is prioritized and there are changes made to traffic patterns, not traffic patterns, to road conditions. We learned that developing those models takes a long time. So those aren't ready, but we can capture that in the recommendations that is a desire of the task force. So I don't believe those will be ready by the time this process is over, but the spirit is adaptation, and that's something we can capture in the recommendations. But if you would like to discuss that in more detail with the transportation folks within the town, I expect that they'd be willing to have a conversation around it. I won't commit them today, but they've always been willing and able to help us talk through things. Third from the bottom here, share a planning and development timeline for the parcel surrounding the Front Range landfill property. That's complete. The last two items are process pieces. So the summary of the fourth meeting, which we finalized together with your input, and then Kearns and West has begun drafting recommendations for future consideration, and that's in process. Hopefully we'll have draft recommendations for community benefits today that we'll build into that document and share it with you soon. Any questions about the action items? Okay, The public comments, I'm going to summarize the public comments. I think we had, 1, 2, 3, 8 of them. And they all, I mean, there was some overlap, but they were all kind of distinct. So bear with me. I want to summarize them and then ask you all if you had reflections. And one was a plea to communicate, well, a request to communicate with the FRICO ditch managers around a potential relocation. And I don't know that that communication has started yet, but I expect that it will once, request for safe trail access from adjacent neighborhoods if new trail systems are developed. There was concern about potential for noise with a new entrance for residents along County Roads 6 and 7. The request that enforcement be prioritized if hauling routes are changed, and that is in the recommendations now. One was asking about communications with North Metro Fire Department if there are infrastructure changes, and the interest there is just making sure emergency action plans are in place and emergency access and evacuation routes are planned for and in place. There's one around just sharing an article around some of the new state regulations to regulate methane. And we'll have, I think that's on our agenda for meeting 6, but that is something that's top of mind, I think, for this community and could be in the community benefits discussion too. And then the last was just a comment with an opinion on development. So you read it and the comment exists, it's out there now. In your interactions with your neighbors and your communities, anything else to add or any reflections on the comments we heard?
Oh, I had a question about one of the comments.
Mhm.
I thought we were Mountain View Fire. Is that,
That's correct.
okay. I just wanted to make sure that wasn't.
So what's North Metro then? I thought that.
It ends at like Lafayette.
Yeah, North Metro actually is right up to Road 6 where we live.
Right.
It's Broomfield.
Okay.
They're a private entity and city and county of Broomfield.
But we'll coordinate with Mountain View as well as the neighboring emergency services, of course.
I'm not sure whether this goes into it or not, and I'm not sure who to speak to, but you had mentioned as far as the new wells that are going to be going in. And our concern is having all of those overweight vehicles going down our road or making that the express route to those construction sites when they're putting the wells in. And I've noticed even the road where it was getting paved, bless you, but the road that was being paved between 6 and 7, the asphalt trucks were coming down our little road instead of taking alternate routes to get to that site that was part of Erie roads. So
So something related to oil and gas development and the impact on traffic in
I'll-
your area.
yeah.
I'll be
So-
sure to work with that developer, with that
Awesome. Yeah.
operator. That's not for this discussion, but I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah,
And
because us on 6 just want a point of contact that way. I mean, we communicate among ourselves first and like, hey, have you seen that? Because we're a 1-mile stretch and then we'll try and make a phone call to somebody. So,
Okay.
yeah, if that permit gets granted, which I think the hearing is going to be delayed till at least October sometime.
okay, all right.
But if they get that permit, yes, please keep an eye on that and keep me in the loop.
Okay. And then like on the construction sites as well that are developing through Erie, because they just keep using our little stretch, our 1-mile stretch is the expressway.
Yeah, and it sounds like and the town is committed. If there are concerns, just
Okay,
reach out to
address
David
them to
directly.
you?
Yeah.
I mean, if they're in my department, I'm happy to take care of them, or I can get you
Okay,
the
that's
right phone
great.
numbers.
At least you can
Yeah.
find somebody for us. Thank you.
I posted on the Erie Highlands Facebook page, and the only comments, to summarize them, were really about safety in a bike lane along County Road 5, which I believe we've talked about several times. And just making sure that the other part was safety of high school drivers and any impacts along those roads. So I think this task force has already raised those issues. So the other comments, nothing, people really said, I don't have anything to say about the landfill. So
That's different than 6 months ago
at least in our neighborhood.
in yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Chris?
And then the person who asked what benefits are there for, County Road 7, County Road 6, I have that same question. Are there any? Would,
Okay, so what are the benefits, if any, that residents on County Road 7 and 6 will gain with moving the entrance to County Road 6?
Mhm.
So we don't get trails, green space.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there is interest in trails and green space for people in the Ranch Eggs, yeah. Okay. Is that something you feel like could be addressed with what we're calling community benefits and just expressing that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So giving voice to that, yeah. Michael, how about you? Any questions on the action items? Sorry, I didn't ask you, or reflections on the public comments?
No, nothing to add.
Okay. All right, let's move into the draft recommendations for the hauling routes. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is in front of you as well. The purpose of the conversation for this and also for the land use, kind of what we're summarizing and for land use, is to look at this together, look at the words, look at the intent, and let us know if anything is missing, if you have questions or concerns. And even when I was preparing for the meeting this afternoon, I can see where we might want to adjust some of the language. So if there are words that you get stuck on, let's talk about that. But know that this is just to present the major concepts, and we'll refine it together in the draft recommendations. And we talked about this for 2 meetings. So one was when we all met virtually in our 3rd meeting, and the last meeting on the 31st of July. So bear with me. I'd like to read it out loud, and then we'll pause to ask if there are any anything to discuss here. So how this would go for the restricted routes is the landfill task force recommends that haulers not serving local neighborhood needs be restricted from using the following routes to access the Front Range landfill: Sheridan Parkway between Highway 7 and County Road 4, County Road 4 between County Road 5 and Highway 7, County Road 6 east of County Road 7, County Road 7 between County Road 5 and Highway 7, and County Road 7 south of County Road 6, honoring the existing agreement between Ranch Eggs neighborhood and the landfill, not the town. So that's one mistake we'll correct.
Morgan, one, yeah,
County Road 7 between County Road 6 and Highway.
Okay, Cheryl and I were trying to put that puzzle together before the meeting. Cheryl caught that already. So
and
4 doesn't go to Highway 7.
yeah,
4 goes between 5 and Sheridan.
Okay.
And we probably, for clarification, it should say State Highway 7 to
Okay, so-
not confuse people with County 7.
okay, so the 4th bullet, County Road. Randy, tell me again.
County Road 7 between County Road 6 and Highway 7.
Okay.
Not County.
And then Scott.
4 is between County Road 5 and
Sheridan.
Sheridan Parkway.
County Road 4, so that second bullet, County Road 4 between County Road 5 and Sheridan.
You probably want to put in there.
Randy, if
State
you mind coming
Highway
up,
7.
then we can't hear you, or folks on
It-
line can't hear you.
what he's suggesting is
Stop, yeah.
correct where you've got Highway 7 to State Highway 7, because we've got a CR 7 and a State Highway 7 in such close proximity.
And there's probably a Federal Highway 7 somewhere. I don't.
David. When I read this, I already feel like I'm reading a bedtime story to my kids. It rhymes, so.
4 kids,
Not you, you're not the kid. We're all adults here, but.
if that's what you're reading to them. That's,
From the sleep
that
right
is
now.
child abuse, and we could,
All right, Jeff,
Hold
which Highway 7 should say
All-
state,
anyone that says.
Yeah,
Highway
anyone
7,
that says HWY 7, change to State
state?
Highway
Okay.
7.
All right, thank you. Oh. Sheridan, I won't read it again. We've made the corrections and
Yeah.
you're all so familiar with the area. I feel like we can follow, but those are the restricted routes. So the question is, any restricted routes that we haven't talked about, last call, or anything that you feel like should be emphasized here, or really we're just talking about the roads right now, and then we'll get into the other themes about safety.
So, I mean, I don't know if it's, not to belabor it, but do we need to also spell out clearly the routes that sometimes people have taken through Vista Ridge when there's construction, like Vista Parkway to whatever that is, forgotten all the names of the roads over there, but I feel like the town has done a pretty good job of dissuading, and the landfill have done a pretty good job of dissuading haulers, and certainly the big trucks can't move there. but
One thing I feel like you all shared was, let's focus on the majority and not micromanage, for lack
Cool.
of a better term, the neighborhood use or, the
I'm fine with that.
65% of, no, let's talk about it, but is there anything else that you feel like is a big chunk of the hauling routes that's not captured here? Or is that kind of a separate?
I agree with you. I think we should add Alpine Road on there, or Alpine
Yeah.
Drive. Because when there was any kind of construction anywhere or shoulder, they were cutting through Vista Ridge, basically going down Alpine, which is a 25-mile-an-hour street. And the minimum speed I was observing was 35, 40 miles an hour.
So
And
you
that's on
observed, yeah.
pretty good sized trucks. A very residential street with park alongside it, just not okay.
and bus
So-
stops and all sorts of
Yep.
fun stuff.
So
Mailbox
Alpine
stops,
Drive.
bus stops,
Okay.
Alpine Drive.
Well, I'm trying to find that on my map. From a Waste Connections perspective or a town perspective, any concerns there?
No, we could speak more broadly, just, I forget the traffic term, but the road's smaller than collectors,
Mm-hmm.
the capillary roads in neighborhoods
Artery.
are not, whatever I'll have to ask John what the correct traffic term is, but
Also don't forget about Road 6.
It's
You
on.
have it, right? Cheryl,
Six
it's in
east
there,
of
right?
Sept.
You feel like it's kept
Yeah,
on there?
okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, for like all traffic. Shouldn't be there.
Oh, for Ultra, you're right.
Actually,
Okay, so
Morgan-
adding Alpine Drive through Vista Ridge, yeah, Jeff?
Sorry, just for clarity on that one, it's Hamilton Road feeding into Alpine Drive. Hamilton Road is the little,
the spur.
the spur that's
one
about
block.
30 feet long.
It's the continuation of County 5
Yeah.
for 30 yards.
Any,
I thought last time we talked about not having the western trucks western hauling, coming up Erie Parkway from 287. But that's a recommendation. I thought we were gonna try to encourage them just to take Highway 7.
so not having Western disposal trucks go up.
I mean,
state
I
hi-
jumped ahead a slide, but I thought we talked about only having local hauling on Erie Parkway
You're talking about to the west, correct?
from the west.
Right.
Yeah.
I
Right,
agree. I think we did. Ask them to continue on State Highway 7 to 25 north and then Erie Parkway back
Mhm.
in.
So that was one of the designated routes they
Right.
used
For
traffic, and
Western.
I'm jumping ahead too here. We can toggle back and forth. Do you mind going to the next slide 13?
I just want to remind everybody once again, for the safety, I guess just keep in mind, once again, that it sounds like so much of it is just going to be put down on Road 7. So I-25 south on Road 7. Whereas even Mark had made a statement that it wouldn't be wise to just have it consolidated down to one route.
Yeah. And I think that's a value that's been shared. And the value is dispersing the hauling routes. So if you look here, traffic coming from, or hauling coming from the west, splitting that between Highway 7 East and the Erie Parkway.
Yeah.
What are we looking at?
Does it come in
I'm gonna pause. What are we looking at?
to jump off?
Good.
Sheridan, come down
Okay.
Skyline and then come to Hamilton.
Here's a,
So, and that's in Vista Ridge, right?
correct.
Yeah, okay.
What happened to the suggestion? I don't know whether it was thought about or passed or what. I think it was you that said one way in, one way out.
Let's, yeah,
didn't
let's
see
go
that
back
in
to that
there.
one. I want to talk about the west
Okay.
piece first, because if you look at the suggested routes coming from Western Disposal mostly, there are two recommendations here, but there's no kind of priority assigned. It's the hauler's choice, really. So one is Highway 7 east to I-25 north, and then around west to County Road 7, 7 south to 6, and then that right-hand turn. And Cheryl, I know you'll suggest the diverter, but it's important for your community to have that diverter, kind of a slip lane onto 6, and then a left into the new entrance. But also Erie Parkway east to 5, 5 south, and then a left onto 6. Am I hearing that it's not sufficient to just leave it to the hauler's choice and that there's a kind of recommendation on top of the recommendation?
Well, and Mark, I'll ask you and Randy to correct me if my recollection is wrong. I recall when we were talking about that the recommendation, the first one, Highway 7, yada, 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 would be what would be recommended by the landfill for major haulers like Western, and that the other route would be necessary for local haul.
So the
In other
first,
words, local haul would not be forced to do the big circuitous route, but, you know, essentially the Erie Parkway westbound, or excuse me, eastbound route would be primarily for local haul.
Yeah, I think
But
the
that
way
isn't-
we characterized it, Jeff, was the commercial vehicles, which Western is a primary, right?
Yeah.
Going down State Highway 7 and other large commercials would be, we would want them to go down 7, up 25.
Yep.
Across Erie Parkway and down.
So basically a walking floor truck would take
Yeah.
the top route, and smaller trucks would
Yeah,
be
and-
permitted to do either.
Yeah, I think that what we talked about is some of these, you know, smaller haulers, the non-commercial haulers, they're probably gonna go the way they're
Yeah.
gonna go. Which is that whatever the 35 percentile, they're probably, some of them are gonna go down Sheridan.
Yeah.
But I think in an effort to serve Vista Ridge and the concern that they have about these larger haulers going down Sheridan, we wanted to come up with a definitive alternative to that. So that was the objective.
Okay, so Morgan, I think what probably just needs to be captured for future versions is that first line is recommended for
big trucks?
haulers.
Yeah. haulers.
For transfer trailers only, is that what you're proposing?
I think the packer trucks, I mean, I would refer them to the commercial haulers.
Mhm. Yeah.
Well,
if we're
just one thought process on that, the bigger trucks.
Can you
Uh,
please come up to a
yeah.
mic, both of you?
I think one of the things that we have to be cognizant of is the big commercial trucks, which are the walking floor trailers, the tipping trailers, things like that, to get them off of the roads that are near the residential area, right? But the smaller trucks, if you divert all the smaller trash trucks to the same road, you're gonna have a big problem with
Mhm.
traffic on that one road. So they're gonna need to be able to use other alternatives to come in. That's only, for me, it's a safety issue, right? You
Absolutely.
get that many people coming down I-25, down Erie Parkway, and they come down 7, that's gonna be a traffic jam.
So
If you got the big trucks and some of the smaller commercial trucks on it. And, you know, usually the smaller commercial trucks, like the garbage trucks that work in your residential areas and the front loaders, things like that, they're typically not as noisy and they don't do the damage to the roads that the bigger trucks do.
So if I could put a couple of haulers' names on this, just to make sure
Yeah.
I'm in sync. So today, if I go out for a run and I run along 4 and then down Sheridan, I see Western, I see STS, and I often see Blue Bear. Blue Bear would probably choose their own route.
Right.
Western and STS would likely take that first.
We would, the ones that we would be looking at are Western, which is they haul walking floor trailers. STS, they have walking floor trailers, and then MBI,
Yep.
which uses the tipper.
Yep.
So it's just a different
Yeah.
type trailer is what it is. But it would be anybody that has those big trailers. We do have a couple other ones, modern trucks, and they come from another area, but we can have them do the same thing
Yeah.
because they actually work for us.
So
Plus
how
also,
how would
Randy.
we, if you don't mind, how would we define that without being too specific and still allowing flexibility if,
Well,
or
I
closures?
think the way Randy has described it previously is that, you know, again, it comes down to that 65%. Those are the people who have accounts
Mhm.
who are likely going to be taking those routes. And so probably the account holders are going to be told to take the
25.
designated route.
Well, and one of the things that, just to reiterate is, believe it or not, I have a lot of control of whether those trucks can dump in the landfill.
Mhm. We believe
Uh,
it.
And so when we first do this and we set the parameters that by a permit and what we got approved through Town of Erie, these are the designated routes for these trucks. There will be information sent to each one of those companies. I will meet with the bosses of those companies personally. Maybe Mark will be with me, but we will let them know that is it. And if they deviate from that, if we catch a driver that continually does that, I'll ban the driver from the landfill. The truck can come in, but it's gonna have to be with a different driver. Because usually it's the drivers that are making that decision. You know, I think there was 2 Waste Connection trucks that went down County Road 6 on Sunday. Well, they had no business going down there, and I took care of that this morning. But that's the kind of things that I can do. I've done it before for other violations. Safety is big at our landfill, and if they do not follow safety information, we'll do the same thing. And I have asked people not to come back, and they don't like it, and their bosses don't like it, but you know, it's the principle, and I won't deviate from that at all. And again, like with Vista Ridge, I sit in Vista Ridge quite often, right there at the corner of Hamilton and Alpine, and watch to see who comes in there. Now, there's going to be some trash trucks that come in there, actually pick up waste, some roll-off boxes that go through there, but I'll stop them if I see them, and they have to show me their route sheet of what address they're picking up. And if it's in Vista Ridge, fine, because they have to go through it to get to it. But if they're not, I make them turn around and go back, tell them, don't come in here again.
Okay.
So.
Yeah.
Framed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it's like at minimum, these
Yeah.
tractor trailer rigs is what they are.
Right.
So it'd be something along those lines, I would suggest, is at
Because part of-
minimum, they are excluded from these restricted routes.
Because part of your 65% also includes garbage trucks, right? Like down at City of Thornton and some of these others. Because I think there's some, it's kind of nebulous the way we're hearing it right now is commercial hauler. Commercial haulers is not restricted to semis. So
So we'll make that
what
change.
you're
yeah.
saying, Randy, is that the garbage trucks will still be coming up Sheridan and some of the other, rather than, so this limiting hauler traffic, the wording there is really not correct, in my opinion, because that's not hauler, because haulers would be everybody.
It's commercial.
If no, we're talking,
Yeah.
not even commercial, we're talking semis. We're limiting it to semis, because from what Randy is saying, if I understand you, is that that's the only that's the only restriction you really want to look at. Because otherwise we'd have everybody and their mom going down County 7 from Deary Parkway. And that would be every trash truck, every semi, except for Jose's Landscaping coming up Sheridan.
So that's a really good piece to add and to clarify in there. And it still allows the other 35% or whatever that number is to disperse around the neighborhood. So I know Cheryl and then Sherry wanted to share. Please go ahead.
Okay, one of the things I want to remind you guys, if you haven't personally taken Erie Parkway South on Road 7 to access Road 6 where the new proposed entrance is, there is a huge hill there as well. So I know that Jeff had brought up, and it's been mentioned a couple times in the prior meetings, as far as the safety when you're coming down that hill on Road 5, you've got an even bigger hill that you're going to face on Road 7. So be aware when you guys are formulating what you're thinking, that also keep that in mind, that you're going to have so much. What about during icy road conditions? What about when the school buses are coming by to pick up the children? When somebody's trying to check their own mail? That just keep in mind as far as the volume of traffic that you want to send down there for safety reasons.
Okay. So, and that feeds into some of the adaptation and just managing new patterns and making sure the roadways can accommodate them and some safety pieces. Sherry?
Scott picked up my comment, which was
Okay.
really commercial as nearly everybody,
Mhm.
because they're going there for commercial purposes usually, unless it's just a household. And so I think the distinction on the west two routes, probably it does need further clarification, not just at the top line, but distinctions between both of those routes.
Well, so help me understand the word. We're not using big. Commercial's too broad. I mean, what is the word? Is it permit holders with the landfill?
It's a descriptive that Scott gave, which is.
Semis,
Yep,
So
semi-trailer.
that's specific. Okay.
yeah.
Because hauler is anybody hauling trash in there.
Yep.
And
I mean,
that's
I can be a
different-
hauler on a Sunday morning. Yeah.
Can you assign it to like a weight limit?
Or axles, number of axles.
Yeah.
Well, but does semi trucks encapsulate what we're
Mhm.
getting at here? Yeah, Randy, I see Randy nodding. Okay, so these are good distinctions. I appreciate this conversation because it makes it more easier to implement for Randy and others too. And Jeff, let's go ahead, Jeff, and then I want to go back to the slide and just
I
check
don't
on that.
think-
Oh,
So for clarification, then, that 65% number is not going to all be moved off of those roads. It's going to be the semis that are part of that 65. So it's a subset of that 65%. Randy, could you give us a rough estimate of what that number really is?
and
what
Randy, come up to
percentage-wise?
the mic, please. Just take a seat.
My guess, my best guess would be that the tractor trailers, with how many loads that they make a day, because they make more loads than the smaller trucks do. So you're probably looking at more like 40%, 35 to 40% would be coming off of that with the bigger trucks. But they can do 6 or 7 loads a day, where the regular garbage trucks, they're maybe doing 1 to 2 loads a day to the landfill.
Okay.
Okay,
Just for clarification, because anybody listening in online or reading through this later need to understand that 65% number is kind of a misrepresentation of what we're really doing.
when it sounds like we're not as much trying to get to the quantity, but more the quality or the types of offenders. And sorry if anyone's listening in, but related to noise or speed or engine braking, things like that, the potential for. David, do you mind going back a slide, please? Any kind of nays or objections to defining that a little bit more clearly in the recommendation? Okay. So we did make changes to some substantive here and then some clarifications. We added Hamilton Road feeding into Alpine through Vista Ridge. I want to move on from this list, but can I get kind of head nods? Is this with the inclusion of that 6th one through Vista Ridge sufficient?
Yes.
Okay. Sherry? No?
No, I'm good.
Oh, it's good.
Do we
Okay.
need to change the term haulers to something else then
On the next slide,
on that, on
yeah, I
both of
think in
those?
general, we are going to change it, yeah.
Okay. But that's kind of, like I said, it's very nebulous when you say hauler.
And it's not commercial haulers and semi trucks. Is it commercial haulers with semi trucks? Is it? Randy, how would you define
Just semi.
semis? Yeah. The ones we
No, I
want
think
taking 25.
There, I think there is a distinction
I agree.
between the two. So
Yeah.
the former slide, the intent of this slide is if you're a contracted hauler, if they're one of your regular guys and they come in all the time, we'd ask them to honor that they're not on these particular roads. And then routes is different. Routes is where we're concerned about which types of vehicles are on which of the
So
routes.
contracted haulers are restricted from certain routes and then semis are encouraged or requested to take.
And I would
25.
say, I would call them tractor trailers.
Yeah.
That includes a tractor, a semi, and you can do semi-tractor trailers if you want. But that's going to encompass not just the trash hauling trucks, but the side dumps, that are semi-tractors, things like that of that nature. We'd want to incorporate them. So I
Okay.
think if you use that term, that covers all
Okay.
of those.
Thank you,
You're
Randy.
looking at this slide, I think what you were saying before is that individual garbage trucks will still be coming on all these routes.
I think local traffic
Mhm.
only, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I think the little trucks, you got to break up the traffic some
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Mhm.
You can't have everybody go down County Road 7 or you'll have a worse situation because not everybody goes down County Road 5 from each end. They, go from different places. If you tried to put everything coming off I-25 on the County Road 7, that will be a lot of traffic.
But we don't have on the restricted route County Road 5 south to County Road 6. That is not a restricted route. So I think that covers the concern that your smaller guys, we don't want them to come up, but they can come down and
Mhm.
make that left turn
Yeah.
onto 6.
But he's also saying they can still come up Sheridan if it's
Well,
just a
you'll
track
have
truck.
trucks that got to come up Sheridan because they're pulling garbage out of those subdivisions, you know, even across from King Supers or, you know, anything. Those areas are their best routes to come in. And it's hard to ask the smaller trucks to go around. Bigger trucks are on a main road. Most of them come down I-25s on the STS and MBI, going up to the next exit. Some of them go up there anyway.
Yeah.
So when I asked you all at our very first meeting, we went member by member to share your concerns and kind of your interest in this process. There was a lot about noise, about safety, smells, you know, just the volume of traffic. And if you were to think about it both from your day one on the task force and also from the perspective of commercial haulers, individual haulers, landscapers, the semi-tractor trailers, does this, I won't go person by person, but I want to think about it through that lens of, do you feel like if this meets those interests and concerns and addresses the concerns and also is easy to understand and implement from Waste Connections perspective and the haulers, all colors of haulers? If you were to read this and you were a permit holder, is anything unclear or just so impractical that it's not a wise and implementable solution?
I think the one recommendation sort of outside of this specific slide, but to your point, is that I would recommend to council and staff that they not view this as something that's set in stone and that,
Okay.
like traffic, road profiles and everything else, that they also, be open to adapting this in the future. And so if we see that this is not clear enough, that, we
Yeah.
can revisit it and work with the landfill to.
That's why I'd like to
Yeah, David,
clarify
move
the
on 2 slides if
verbiage.
you don't mind. Or
That's
3
why
even.
I think clarifying the verbiage
more.
now
And then another one.
will avoid a
Next
lot of
one.
that in the future, because what we're really taking off of Sheridan and some of these other roads is just the semi-traffic. Is really what it boils down to. The restriction is saying, because we still have the town of Thornton or the city of Thornton and all these that are individual haulers. They're still commercial, they're still haulers, but they're just individual garbage trucks. They'll still be using those routes. So that the only restriction really is on the semi trucks. As long as we're clear on that and we're clear on what we're telling the public and our neighbors, then I think we're fine. It's just if we leave it ambiguous and say haulers,
Mhm.
that leaves a lot of people going, well, wait, that's a hauler and he's on that road. But that's not what we're talking about. Am I clear? Is that where we're at, Randy? Because I think that's what okay,
Mhm.
so we're,
Yes, there's clear
Randy agrees, yeah.
expectations.
right. So then we need the verbiage on here to be real clear on that,
Yep.
because we're not restricting haulers, we're only restricting semis.
I have a
And-
question for the town.
Sure.
Um,
Is it about the,
yeah,
Yeah.
all of this stuff that we're going through right now, is that part of the vision statement for the town?
I don't know the answer to that. Like as far as the revisions to the comp plan, et cetera, or like in
Right,
what
right.
context?
Like all of the development of the land on Erie Parkway east of Road 7. So I know that,
Like the larger gateway.
yes, yeah, that's what I mean.
project.
Yeah, Gateway. Yeah. Has all of this been incorporated into that?
So, yeah, I've been talking with planning about the timing of the development on the east side of 7, and that's all going to be quite a ways out. And by quite a ways, I mean a decade plus, because there's not currently any utilities out there to serve any of that area. And so it'll have to be developed from a more or less north to south. Because you can't, the utilities all stem from the north corner and will progress south.
North corner, where would the north corner meaning what?
Like more or less Highway 52,
Oh, coming from 52.
coming from
Okay.
52,
Morgan Hill area.
working south.
Or no, I'm
or
sorry. Westerly? Is it? No. There's so
Highway
many of them.
52.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the first piece of that was Summerfield
Okay,
to get the utilities far enough east that they can then progress south.
okay,
And a lot of that's topographic,
okay.
and outside of my.
so I'm
lane per
mindful of
se.
the time. I noted that as, I think that's a
Yes.
delightful question. Like, how does all this play into the comp plan, the town's vision? And it's noted. And because it's not specific to this, I want to move on if that's okay.
Yeah, and much of that area, in the new comp plan is being proposed as largely industrial, like business uses. So there won't be a bunch of residents out there on the east side of 7, presumably when that develops.
Morgan, could we go back a slide?
Does the clicker work now, David?
Go
Or-
back go back to the restricted slide.
This,
And maybe that introductory language could just say semi tractor trailers are restricted and all other haulers are discouraged from using
Mhm.
these routes.
Yep.
Because I really do think one of our discussion points very early on was that we need to kind of funnel all traffic in certain directions so that it's not all over the place and not interrupting neighborhoods and creating safety issues elsewhere.
Well, to Randy's point, though, that's impractical.
I
to
think
put
it's
everything coming down County 7.
But that's not what we're doing.
I think that's a question that I don't know is clear yet. I mean, my suggest this, that I think we're all pretty clear that we can eliminate those semi-tractor trailers going down Sheridan. That's not going to be a problem to commit to. Then the question comes to Scott's point on what about the front load trucks, the rear load trucks that are picking up in residential areas and other commercial areas, what to do about them. And I think that if we were to move forward with a PD application with the town, we would want to make it very clear that we would want to give them the authority based on experience of seeing the traffic flows to impose further restrictions beyond the semi-tractor trailer rigs on imposing further restrictions on routing those customers too. I think it's difficult to know before the modeling is done what that actually looks like in terms of the free flow of traffic coming south off of Erie Parkway down 7 and 5. So I think these are things we don't know right now.
Mhm.
But I think that we would be comfortable in giving the obviously the authorities at the town say, look, hey, Waste Connections, this is what you're going to do from now on. Not only are you restricting or preventing the semi rigs from going down Sheridan, here's what else you're going to do. But it's based on observed flows.
So then can we make it as a 2-tier recommendation then where we say initially restrict it to this? And if it's if the traffic studies after that show that it's feasible to restrict it further, then do so?
Here, David, move
I
forward.
think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I'd like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I think it's a great,
So let me just, thank you for,
sorry.
no, perfect. Two more, David, please. So there are kind of attachments on both the restrictions and the suggested routes. So and we've organized them into 4 categories: analysis, communication, roadway design, and community partnerships. And really the themes are just enforcing what you all recommend, adapting, and that's what Scott brought up. It's that 2-tier, if this isn't working out, there's a commitment to study it and react and adapt, both from an infrastructure point of view or more directions or more enforcement. Communicating with the haulers that, just open communication, that these decisions have been made. I'm reading through these. They're all in front of you in your packet as well. There's some roadway design pieces, both to adapt and then the traffic diverter on the northwest side of 6 and 7. There's reporting mechanisms, there's enforcement, and there's just a reporting from the community if they notice items that kind of aren't consistent with these recommendations. So is there anything that you would like to add to the, they're kind of add-ons to the hard and fast route restrictions and alternate suggestions? Cheryl?
One of the questions I have is, I understand that as the town continues to grow, that routes can be revisited. But my question is, are any of us willing to give up what the restrictions are now, like Rena's restriction or Road 6 restriction or the Sheridan restriction? Because honestly, that's my big fear, is that as the town gets bigger, they're going to say, hey, we're going to take a look at things now, and it makes more sense for us to send everything down our little Road 6 because it's out of sight, out of mind. So as far as verbiage goes, is there a way to incorporate that in there that you can't go backwards?
Well, that,
But I think
in general, it would be revisited as a whole. And because really what we've done is you have all looked at the system and how to balance the system. And that's a value that might not be in here, right? It's think about things as the system and not just peeling off pieces.
And-
And Jeff?
to the point of adapting to future conditions, I mean, when I used to sit up here as an elected, one of the things I had trouble sort of reconciling sometimes was that we could look at a road and say Erie Parkway needs to be 2 lanes in each direction the whole way. Town of Erie doesn't have money to pay for that. So it goes at the pace of development. And that's why we wind up with a mile being developed or half a mile being developed, and then 6 months later, the next, and then a year later, the next, because the developers pay their way. So that's one thing that has to be accounted for. By working on it now, the town engineers will be able to look at it and say, the road profile on Erie Parkway, when it's complete, is going to need to look like this, and developer B, developer C, developer N, as you come in, your contribution to Erie Parkway is going to be making sure it matches this new approved profile. So that's one of the adaptations. The other thing is, I like in spirit saying we don't want people on 6. But at some point, Broomfield is going to widen Sheridan. That, we can say we don't want people on Sheridan right now. But if Broomfield improves Sheridan to the point that it is safe and that they're going around the east side of the landfill, then I'm less concerned about it. So I think, we can't be so rigid that, well, also because intergovernmental agreements get rewritten all the time.
Yeah.
We can't expect that what we say today will be set in stone. So let's do the best we can and make it request that it be incumbent upon council and other community members that they use their best judgment and follow the spirit of our recommendations, if not the letter.
I understand. Yeah. That means none of us are going to ever have to take our eye off the ball. Because
you-
we all have
That's why
something.
you're here today
yeah.
too. I mean, you all applied to be on this task force because you're interested, and you can continue that interest or assign.
The reality
to
is you
folks
can
in
look
your
at the
community.
airport and it's the same kind of thing
Wait,
around the airport.
sorry, Scotty, start over.
I said, you can look at the airport or any basic airport, especially newer ones like DIA, built out in the middle of nowhere with all kinds of land use restrictions because there can't be here because of the noise footprint. You go out there now and look around DIA, they're building apartments right on the other side of 470. It's being encroached on. And those people are going to come in and within 5-10 years, they'll be complaining about the noise. The reality is things change. You don't get to, if you don't own the property, you can't really say how it's going to be. I mean, it's nice to say, I'd like this to stay this way. I get it. When you moved here, it was different. It was different when I moved here too, because Erie Highlands wasn't there, neither was Colliers or a whole bunch of other neighborhoods, but it's progress. That's part of the reason we moved to Erie. We liked it. We liked where it was. So does everybody else. We have to try and do this in a way that's going to be amenable to, as Jeff said, as they develop more and more, that it still fits in with what we're hopefully laying out guidelines. That's why, as I say, clarification on verbiage is so important now, so that we don't have another landfill task force in 2 years to clarify what we didn't do today.
Yeah.
So knowing what you know now, with the concerns you have now, does this address, and I would ask you actually not to focus on the specific words right now, but do the themes of adaptation and safety make sense to you right now? Is there anything missing?
I think Jeff's concern about future development and how developers have to contribute to the roads along the development should be placed in here somewhere, maybe community partnerships, because they are a critical piece of this puzzle, apparently.
So future is that,
That part of the comp plan or the,
That,
it's already.
Yeah,
a
I think that would be
development
planning and
plan.
development that takes
Yeah.
care of that.
Yeah, it's a much bigger
Yeah.
phenomenon. All,
I mean,
all the road improvements.
Scott,
come
no
with
one's,
development.
no one's exempt from it because that RV storage lot right across the street from you in your backyard, at some point, they may come along, the developer says, we're gonna put in multifamily housing all through that because it makes more money. So I guess none of us are safe, no matter where we're at in developments.
Exactly.
Sherry,
Those
the,
people holding onto those properties are just waiting for the right size checkbook to come walking in.
But to-
Sherry, you're saying there's something missing here, and I hear this from Jeff and others too, around future development, being aware and working within these recommendations.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay.
Yes, please.
it's like Michael has a question.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry, Michael. Go ahead.
Hey, no problem. I was just curious if the analysis of traffic takes into consideration pedestrians and bicyclists, because we've talked about bike lanes and uh,
Mhm.
the growth of some of those lanes, and I'm not sure if that's included in
Okay.
what that analysis would be.
Yeah, okay.
I thought
Um,
it was later. We're gonna talk about that later under community.
Oh, we are? Okay.
But I also think in the analysis piece, Lisa, there could be something more explicit around people who drive cars, but also multimodal uses. Yeah.
Yep, excellent.
Any other big pieces missing from, and David, actually, do you mind advancing one slide? Any other big pieces missing from these recommendations? You'll have another crack at this when you see words on paper, and they will be carefully put on paper, but. yeah, sure.
Okay, the first one, first bullet under roadway design, the diverter should be on the west side, not the east side, because otherwise you're restricting local traffic on the east side on 6.
The northwest side, right? That's what
Yeah,
we talked
yeah,
about. Okay.
northwest side.
What
So
else?
that way we can still get in and out. And then also the last bullet at the bottom, I guess I talked to David about that a little bit.
So
if-
working with local communities to address traffic from nearby industry and fracking sites in a similar manner.
Yeah, because we're already going to be dealing with the additional traffic and also the learning curve as people are coming down the road, the diverters in, they're going to be, whoa, what do I do now? I've ignored all the other signs that are flashing in front of me coming down the 6, but now I'm facing a roadblock. So in that learning curve, it's going to get really hairy. And besides the developers and the frackers and all that, can we say something about including well, it says local communities.
So the process
Yeah.
that Public Works normally goes through, they have methodologies for training people to changing traffic patterns. And it starts with big signs and flashing lights
Yeah.
and multiple signs, and then eventually weans them down to what will be the permanent condition, which would be, you know, a traffic light or an arrow or whatever it is. I think if we go too far down that path, we're stepping on the town engineers who kind of have a way that, you know, they do that based on history.
Well, I think what I'm trying to ask for is that I truly, obviously, that's why I applied to be in this position, appreciate the task force, the landfill task force. Is there something that as a community we can get involved? Like rather than just David providing me with a phone number or us just randomly calling anybody in
And
Erie, you know?
So you're asking for a public process
Yes,
when
please.
these.
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
exactly. Thank you.
Okay, public process. And I feel like we have that in here a little bit, Cheryl, but I'm hearing from you and just in some other comments that the open and transparent processes this gets designed and implemented is important.
Yes.
Okay, my proposal is we move on from this,
Yes.
but did you say? And then work on some of the land use pieces. Any just specific to what might be missing, anything else? Okay. And I don't see, okay. All right, the next one is land use recommendations. There were a couple pieces here. One was the land swap. We'll get into that, the land swap to swap the small maintenance yard that Waste Connections uses in the southwest part of town with the existing maintenance, with the town of Erie's property, about a 10-acre property in the northwest corner of this quadrant that we've been studying together. The second piece was the notch, this horseshoe shaped notch that covers a plugged gas well on the west side. Thank you, David, for the visuals. And then just Waste Connections' desire to expand its permitted boundary into the southeastern part of its property, which we kind of discussed this at the last meeting. My understanding is it doesn't mean more, it extends the life of the landfill. So the operations would continue until, yeah. Let's do the maintenance yard first, David, if you don't mind moving to slide 21. Okay. Actually, move to slide 23, please.
This one?
No.
I don't have an, oh, this is
Next
22.
one.
I see the numbers now.
Oh, I'm sorry, David.
I didn't know.
I
there
want
were
you to
numbers
read
in
my mind.
it. I'm like, I don't know where we're at.
So there are visuals in front of you. We can toggle back and forth as we discuss, but we summarized what we understood to be the starting point for the recommendation as the recommendation to move forward with the land swap, for the town and Waste Connections to negotiate a fair price, knowing that they're different sizes, different uses. That's not up to this task force, but a fair price. Waste Connections would relocate its maintenance yard to the 10-acre parcel of land in the northeast part of the quadrant. And there would be a roadway developed internal to Front Range landfill so that maintenance trucks would not need to exit the landfill and could access it from internally. And then the town won't commit right now to what that's used for, but what we heard is it's important to have a public use for that 3.6 3-acre parcel of land that would become part of the town within the town's possession. So that's the starting point. Again, same kind of spirit here. What's missing, what needs to be clarified, what, if we think about both meeting the needs of you all in your communities and then how it can be implemented. Is this wise and is everything we need to capture on paper here?
Morgan, I'd like to add one additional point to this is that Waste Connection, prior to the swap, does an environmental audit of their land and conducts and pays for any remediation efforts on that land so that the town of Erie is not carrying that ticket if there is one.
Can you tell me more about what might be the concern there? The
Greasers, oil, you name it.
Yeah,
Gas.
a thorough environmental assessment would be,
Yes,
yeah.
phase two at least. Yeah,
Maybe not
everything.
phase 2, who knows? Maybe you guys have been real clean there. I'm gonna guess that
Yeah.
probably there's a.
Yeah,
I don't see Waste Connections having a problem with that.
no.
Okay. Okay, sure. Yeah, thank you for that.
That's pretty standard, even if the town buys a residence, people do funny things in their garages.
Yeah, I just don't want the town of Erie. I mean, after we heard Jeff say that they can't even don't have funds to build out a road and they have to rely on developers. I don't want the town to be stuck with any unnecessary environmental remediation.
So I appreciate, those are implementation pieces that
You
I
don't want
think are
to use
important to get on
funds.
paper here.
Yeah.
What else? What's your reaction to the way this looks, Lisa?
I think it looks good.
Well, we just talked for a long time about transportation routes, and I don't know how their trucks will get to the landfill now. I imagine they'd use the same routes that we were talking about. Okay, and using the same restrictions we'd be using. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Well, back to children's books. Good night construction site. They all go to sleep on the lot. So that's what I picture in my little mind. All right. Clearly I have small kids. Okay. Jeff, Chris, I saw this side of the room. Just nod that this looks okay. Anything else? Scott? No? Michael?
Seems like we skipped over a couple slides and just.
Yeah, we can go back. Those are those visuals that you've all seen already, but they,
Well, the ones about the footprint.
oh yeah,
We'll
18,
we'll come
19.
back to those.
those are, yeah,
slides.
sorry, Scott, yeah. Michael, anything to comment on related to the maintenance yard relocation?
No, I don't think so. I don't know if you like to add benefits, um, in order to achieve, less emissions from additional truck traffic, we recommend, blah, 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 the swap or any benefits. Sometimes you like to add those things as a, qualifier of why you're doing some of the recommendations. Those help sometimes.
Yeah, and we had a nice discussion about that at our last meeting too, so we could add that in just for some color.
Yeah.
Okay. Horseshoe shaped notch. So as a reminder, this actually, David, if you don't, can you advance one slide? We'll
more.
get the visual for this
There
one.
we
Yep.
go.
Can you all see that? It's on the west side. It is a carved out piece of the permitted boundary, and Waste Connections is desiring to fill that with waste. It covers a gas well, an abandoned gas well right now. David, you had an action item to talk to the state about
Sure.
any potential concerns with putting waste on there. Go ahead.
Yeah, engineers at the ECMC said this was not unprecedented to cover an abandoned well with refuse. From the town's perspective, I think if the task force wants to recommend the land use for this notch to be waste deposition, that there just be some broad recommendations for safety and monitoring, that the town and Waste Connections as well as the state will come up with a mutually agreeable plan for how to do that. I don't think we could spend probably the next 2 meetings straight just talking about engineering ideas, none of which may or may not come to fruition, but that use just be contingent on a satisfactory method of ensuring that plugged well is monitored and not some future problem for some future generations. But they're very recently plugged. They surpass current state standards. This is not one of the wells that keeps me up at night in town. We've got some old ones that I don't feel as confident about. This one is not a concern. The concern would be, generations from now.
What are the risks in putting landfill waste over an abandoned well? I don't know what those are.
Great question.
Sure. If in the case, if in the future the well became unplugged, which doesn't happen frequently, but does happen on rare exception, you normally don't know that that's happening until there's some sort of evidence at the surface, dead vegetation. We have developers go out and take soil samples, and sometimes you'll find trace methane seeping from these wells. Again, very rarely, but it does happen. The risk would be that if it's under dozens of yards of cover with a liner, it won't daylight, and you wouldn't be aware that there was communication with the subsurface. And oftentimes it's just trace amounts of methane, but we've seen occasions where it was, a bubbling crude. And in that case, now you're potentially jeopardizing those upper aquifers. And it would just be a problem that would go on undetected for a long time unless you have some monitoring plan. Because obviously you're not going to see it under, above the landfill liner.
I know that you mentioned earlier that it would be up to Waste Connections and the town to deal with what the engineering things are, but just quick question. Can't you just extend the well pipe all the way up to the surface of the landfill?
That's one solution, but it creates additional problems because now you have a hole basically in the landfill liner, right? You've got a point of weakness where now, because you've got the oil well down there, but you also have the landfill. And the leachate and things, the landfill's, engineered and designed such that those liquids also don't go down into the groundwater system. And so it's sort of a balance. That is one solution we could potentially explore. It's not my favorite one because it might create more problems than we're trying to address. But I'm certain we've got clever people on both sides of the table, as well as the state. We can come up with something.
Okay.
Or if no satisfactory if we can't come up with anything, then you know, then that's part of that recommendation too.
And Sherry,
So
those
that
are
would be the
things
request of the
we're
town.
all
And I don't,
learning here. Yeah.
I don't think Waste Connections objects to, us figuring out a good way to keep an eye on. There's this well, and I think there's a couple of other recently
Yeah,
abandoned
it's-
wells in the northern part.
That's
too,
right.
so.
It's not unprecedented, first of all. And so what we would need to do is an engineering analysis of that borehole to confirm its integrity. It's quite possible that although they grouted it in as part of the abandonment, that it was not grouted perhaps to an adequate depth, but we'd need to do a geotechnical assessment to determine the integrity of the grouting and the thickness of the grouting. And we may need to supplement it.
Yeah.
That would be part of the engineering design, and then the construction quality assurance manual that we would have to follow as part of then any subsequent liner system that we put over the top of the abandoned, grouted in borehole. So, and of course that goes through the state of Colorado. So they're part and a critical part of the whole process. They undertake a technical review of the entire application. This would be just one piece
Right,
of it.
right.
Yeah.
I think understanding this is helpful, but the task force recommendation can be broader in recommending that this geotechnical assessment is completed, that there is ongoing coordination, or what that looks like, I think is actually missing from, do you mind going back to the one with the words? Yeah. Maybe missing from this list right here.
I liked what David said, so just rattle that off again.
Oh, I don't know what I said.
That video.
Yeah, let's go to roll that
Monitoring.
beautiful bean
Yeah.
footage.
But, and my suggestion is that we add something around the engineering analysis.
Yeah.
It's
to be performed
engineering
before-
analysis, BMPs developed in
Mhm.
concert between the town, the landfill,
Before it's capped,
CDPHE,
and
and
ECMC.
Yeah.
The mutual satisfaction of all stakeholders.
yeah.
So adding to this list,
I've been in ECMC hearing, was listening to lawyers argue all day about cumulative impacts rules. My mind is mushy.
so supporting expanding the permitted boundary into the notch, but with the explicit recommendation that engineering analyses are conducted, there's coordination with stakeholders, that it's deemed safe. As the daughter of attorneys, I wouldn't love the word deemed safe, because safe can mean a lot of different things, but it's advised that you can proceed in capping it and be consistent with existing regulations and be safe. So finding words to define that, we can listen back.
And an adequate monitoring plan.
Adequate monitoring plan.
Yeah, for sure.
I think this is one where words really matter, because again, there is a breadth. The words on paper could be interpreted differently, and this is a public safety priority I'm hearing. So yeah, I would love, yeah. Mhm.
Job.
Jason's writing that down. Jason, we'll talk to you later about that. So we're adding that. There's the emergency planning component that you'll see here, that first bullet, and then we heard from the task force that you just want it to look nice. If Waste Connections is going to fill right there, it should resemble a kind of a natural formation, or the slope that's consistent with everything on both sides. So those are the three pieces to this recommendation, and the general recommendation that of support for the expansion into that notch. Anything else here?
Utilizing advanced hyper-realistic contouring.
Michael, I'll ask you anything to add to our discussion here?
No, I think you guys covered it, discussing, the MIT being properly done, and, looking at the production records. It's kind of more of a stripper well nowadays anyway, so it wasn't producing a lot of oil and gas at the time of its plugging 3 years ago. So I think it makes sense.
And I went back through the records on the well and asked the state engineers to do so as well. Make sure it's tip top and it exceeds all current standards. And so there's that.
Okay. So some work to be done before potentially capping it, but support for capping it with,
It's capped.
filling it with waste. Yes, I understand. Yeah, but support for filling it, expanding the permitted boundary, as so long as these criteria in this plan is followed. Okay. The last one was just about the footprint. Again, another piece about the footprint, and this was a potential recommendation to support a recommendation that supports Waste Connections' potential request, PD request to expand its permitted boundary about 30 acres into the southwestern eastern part of the Waste Connections property. So David, I'm going to ask you actually to go back a lot of slides
Yeah?
to those first
Oh.
couple ones.
I was like 19 or something. Hey,
Yeah.
I nailed it.
Right. So if you can track, it's a faint yellow line. So go back one, David, and then toggle back and forth. There's a faint yellow line. You can see where that triangle of sorts would become part of the permitted boundary and filled at a later date. And the water tanks are on there that are
And
property of the town.
yeah, I spoke with Todd Fessenden, our utilities director, about those water tanks. And it's very much in the town's interest for a few reasons. Those tanks aren't necessarily old. They've still got a lot of life left in them. But newer tanks will obviously last longer than those. It would be a great opportunity there's currently a 1.5 gallon and 1.5 million gallon and a 4 million gallon tank. And this could be an opportunity to just resize them both to 4 million gallon tanks. This will serve not only the existing zone that these water tanks serve, but a lot of the potential development in the northeastern part of the town is all downhill from here. So these tanks would also be able to supply water and water pressure to those. The area currently served by these tanks it's about at the limit because of when you turn on all the fire hydrants at once, it requires a phenomenal amount of water pressure, as you can imagine. And when these tanks were originally installed, according to Todd, he's never seen a pump station quite like it. It's basically a bit too high in elevation. There's when pumps take in air, air is compressible, so the pumps will cavitate and basically just squish air instead of pumping water. And so there's a very elaborate, basically anti-cavitation system to keep the pumps from cavitating. It works, but it's one of those things that whoever designed it was very creative. And by relocating the tanks, we'd obviously be able to install and design a pump system that works as it was intended. So the town's got, there's a few benefits to the town in relocating these tanks. Water tanks, you'll notice a lot of communities have water towers. Erie does not, because we've found suitable locations where we can place these tanks. They have to be at a very precise elevation. There are not very many places you can put water tanks of these size to serve this purpose. There's a great solution here that's been kind of worked out between Waste Connections and the town, that if this is contemplated, this site down here would work absolutely fantastically. None of the engineers have any concerns. And did we do the geotechnical work? That got finished, and there's no issues there. So there's really no big stop signs from the town's perspective on this. Anything to add from you guys?
They had some piers. Sorry. Yeah, Jason Edwards with Weaver Consultants, a consulting company that does a lot of work with Waste Connections, but the foundation report, it had some recommendations for piers. That is all placed
fill. It was, I'd say mildly compacted. You know, if you think about when you're compacting something for a building, you're probably putting in 9-inch lifts. You're watering it. It was all dug from the landfill, which is actually pretty competent material. Probably though, wasn't put in 9-inch lifts and watered and compacted. It was probably more like 12 to 18-inch lifts, with heavy equipment going over it. So they drilled, I forget how many borings it was, just to test the soil and base their foundation off of what they had. So it was something more substantial than a foundation if it was on virgin ground, but nothing crazy.
So there's the water tanks, moving them. The town supports that and it fits within the kind of goals of serving new communities. Another big piece is just this expansion extends the life of the landfill. And what we heard at the last meeting was, I can't remember if this was a task force desire or Waste Connections offering it, but building from the out in. So you're not exposed to the expansion. Over the course of the expansion, you can see the out and then the inside gets filled and that's shielded from public view. Those are the big pieces. So there's a lot there. This is probably the biggest of the land use discussion. So I'm just going to say, I want to make time to have everyone start to jot down community benefits. Just getting to that today would be great. I don't want to cut this conversation short. But the way the recommendation is written and these big themes, are there any questions for the town, Waste Connections, Weaver, consideration? Yep.
If you relocate the tanks, what does that do to the water pipe system coming from the existing tanks to the new ones? And will that be more road construction on County Road 4 or 7?
I think those lines currently run from the tanks a bit north and then out to 7. Obviously, you'd run new lines probably, I'm not an engineer, but presumably where this new access road is, down here to the south, about where the Frico ditch recrosses 7. And what's been sort of proposed is to provide some berming and screening vegetation. So the tanks are pretty visible now up on the hill. I believe they would be less visible with some considerate landscaping.
I just want to make sure that if we move the tanks, that it's not going to mean more road construction on the road we just said was the preferred hauling route on Highway 7 to feed new developments in the northeast.
That section.
Is that where you said in the north?
Yeah, I think right now, I think the pipelines run along here.
Okay.
Can we note that as an action item though?
I can check. You might have a much better idea.
Well,
We need to talk
I
to
don't
the
know if it's
engineer.
much. I can add a little bit more to it. I know they did do some replacement down on the south side, and then that actually cuts on the east side. Yep, right there, cuts up to the tanks.
Okay.
So anything, it would be internal to the site. So they would pick it up once it came onto Front Range property, and internally put in new pipe to the new tank location.
I think what maybe Lisa when there's future development, residential development further north, tearing up the road, the trucks are going to be coming down. Was that your
Yeah,
question?
that was more of my concern.
Not the local, not the immediate infrastructure. You're talking more about the extension of those lines to future development,
Yeah.
right?
Because I thought
on
that's
County
what you
Road
said,
7?
David, was the tanks would fill.
Yeah, that
for
would,
development.
well, I think that would be the case if the tanks got moved or not.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's my understanding that, well, I guess that's mostly talking about the sanitary sewer systems is the big question of how you get that infrastructure out there. I think the water mains, yeah, they go in the right of ways of the road as they go. The water's pressurized. You can go over a hill. The sewage, she goes downhill.
I'm just flashing back to last summer when we didn't have County Road 4 for a long time. So
you're worried about if the water tanks move, the infrastructure to move the water from the water tanks might impact County Road 7? Okay. And
But
it
I-
sounds like it's all that construction's internal, but.
I
in
I
the
think
event-
Jason's right that for current development, it would be internal.
Okay.
But you're right that when they develop the east side of Westerly and continue north or continue east on Erie Parkway, again, that's where we're gonna have to rely on the engineers, and that as they time out those development projects, they're gonna have to add increments of water along the way. Well, they don't like to add increments. At the appropriate time, they'll choose to do 7 north.
You know, I'm not an engineer, and I'm certainly way outside of my department. But I would assume it'd be similar to what we've seen on County Road 5
Mhm.
with Westerly's development.
Okay.
But yeah, as those areas get developed, there will definitely be road work. There will be road work regardless. That's,
Oh, yeah.
we can always count on that.
That hill that those tanks are going on to, Randy, didn't you say that was what was dug out for the landfill? And it was placed there to be used as cover for the landfill? So if we're putting tanks on it, then what are we gonna use to cover the landfill?
Site. In our last engineering, development where we look at our dirt calculations, we're in excess of 3 million, over 3 million cubic yards after we've covered the land. So there'll be more than enough dirt that we can take and still not expose those tanks. You know, if they're bermed up as far as the visual aspect of it, because there's probably 4 million cubic yards in that dirt pile. But we'll take it from that pile in different areas, as well as there's another stockpile in the middle. And what we're taking out of there now, that stuff will be stockpiled too, kind of in a different location to be able to use for final cover.
So you'll still take dirt out of that where those tanks are gonna be?
Out of that hill, yes, in some areas,
And
not
that's
right up
gonna
next to the
That's
tank.
not gonna undermine their construction
Should not.
by digging into that?
And when we put the tanks in, we're gonna have to dig material out of there. You know, when we go in to put the tanks, so some of that material will be stockpiled somewhere else to be able to use.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Then there's also 2 little squares on this picture. They're just north of where it says expansion area. And on the second one, those 2 squares have moved up. Yep, those right there. What are those?
So that is the maintenance building, and I believe it's a convenience center. And there's a handful of differences between these two drawings. If you go back to the first one, David, if you remember, we've got the scale house up there on the north side of the Frico ditch. We had this little area carved out for our maintenance area on the east side, very east side. What we actually did, if you go to the next one, what we're looking at, that's about 200 feet or so on that between the edge of the ditch and where you see that faint yellow line. So what we did, we said, well, we have some area down here to the south that we could put the maintenance building in. But we'd also like to come in on this eastern side, just it pulls it away from County Road 7. Again, so where we are permitted to go is pretty close to the western edge of the Frico ditch. That's our permitted landfill footprint. We're coming in and it's not exactly 200 feet, but it's pretty close. We're coming in 200 feet, which will, draw the noise, the view, everything 200 feet further internal, on that
Oh,
eastern
this
side.
picture that we're looking at now is the preferred
This, yeah,
plant footprint?
so I
This
call
one
it
has a
the
whole lot more.
revised, it's, all of this is still very conceptual.
But it
right?
has a lot more vegetation than the other picture as well,
Yeah.
That,
which
yes.
makes it a lot more
And these
attractive.
hyper realistic advanced contouring.
Yeah, yeah. So this is that's a great segue. The other thing we had, and it's a little tough to see, but you can see on the horseshoe side, on the western side, really anywhere we have vegetation on the slopes, the west, the north, along north side, we've done a couple things, and this was all done by engineers, so I'll follow that up here in a minute. We like straight lines, so dealing in curvy lines is is a little difficult for us, but we put some curves in here to try to, break up the monotony of the straight lines. And we've got a couple things going on. Curves that'll actually be built into the landfill mass. But then we've also got some thickened final cover areas where we'll come back and be able to place more than just grass. So really, you'd want native vegetation. You'd want to stay away from bigger trees that have tap roots. They don't do well in a landfill, but there's a lot of different vegetation that I couldn't begin to talk about. One of the discussions here, not just for the trail layout, but for the vegetation and even for the contouring, would be to work with a landscape architect that has a lot more knowledge about this stuff. And I didn't know if the town had one on staff or a preferred one, but that would be going from, again, this very conceptual look to what we actually start laying out and in front of the CDPHE or anyone else. That would
I
be
have
the
to
next.
interject something though, because they need to know what they're voting on or recommending on. What we can establish, I think at this point, is the boundary.
Mhm.
There are some aspects in where we thicken the cover or create pockets, if you like, of different contouring on the slopes. They are somewhat conceptual, although maybe that this is final form too, right? But in terms of the boundary, I mean, what we're coming to you today with is this is what we would look to do and look to present. So we are looking to come in a couple of 100 feet plus or minus on that east boundary. And then there's some adjustment in that expansion area, that internal expansion area. And I think we actually cut in a bit, don't we, by the notch? To make so that that's not a straight line through there. It's hard to see in this drawing, but I think what they need to know is that the landfill's not going any higher than we're showing, and the landfill's not going, we're not proposing to go beyond the limits as we're showing you today.
So I'll
On the slope, though, maybe we have to make adjustments because the CDPHE doesn't like the way the drainage would work in that particular area. Or maybe somebody in Park and Rec or the sustainability group has a better idea on how to create more of a geomorphic form using thickened cover. So it's nice to have flexibility there. But I wanted to be clear about that.
But when you see, thank you, Mark, and it's a faint yellow line, and maybe next time it can be a thicker line. But when you see the desired boundary here pulled in certain spots, it covers that notch, or sorry, the southeastern part. Any concerns about the proposed boundary here? Could folks support recommending this boundary, knowing what we know about landscaping and the undulation in the boundary to make the area look natural?
So we're going with the assumption that they're going to expand regardless.
No,
Okay, I'm just,
this
this
is
is what we're
what Waste
discussing.
Connections is being transparent in what it desires to do, but it's important to Waste Connections to have support from this task force if it were to go to town council.
because right now the current edge of it is where I don't even know what color you'd call that, maybe a salmon underline there that has a sharp right turn in it,
Mhm.
correct?
And the engineers went out on a limb and made it curvy. Is there anyone here who, looking at that boundary, couldn't support, with some attachments to the recommendations, couldn't support that proposal to expand the boundary?
I have a question. Boundary expansion. And that is, what is that development where the proposed water tank language is written over it? It's maybe some gas wells or something.
What slide are you looking at?
Oh,
That one. See where the
that's Coyote
Coyote
Trails.
Trails, thank you. Yes, it is some gas wells.
By moving the tanks closer to that, is there any risk to the water in the tanks, to any emissions in the piping, anything?
No, it really shouldn't be. Yeah, the tanks are obviously watertight.
Right, but there's
Uh,
piping to them
sure.
and there's,
It is elevated above that oil and gas facility. That oil and gas facility was built in 2016. So it's pretty modern standards. It's got both primary and secondary containment. So any spills that would occur would be contained within the footprint of that oil and gas facility. And they've got remote shut-in capabilities out there. It's not the old big tank of crude oil hanging out for 20 years
okay,
type of facility. But that's certainly something we could take a look at internally. It doesn't jump out to me as an immediate concern,
okay.
but
It almost seems like it would be better based on your earlier conversation about the pipes now run to the west side of that
Yeah,
drill site or that pad site.
Coyote?
So this would actually be taking it farther away if that's how the pipes would go.
sure. But yeah, to get some sort of contamination, you'd need failures in basically both pipe systems
yeah,
adjacent to each other, and
not unheard of.
Well, Sherry, is that something you want to recommend?
Well, I think
Or-
they should consider, the closeness to that facility and if there's any environmental or exposure hazard.
And I won't try to summarize that, but is that something that an engineer could
Yeah,
explain in plain language for our recommendation too? I mean, I am hearing concerns around some of the impacts of moving those, whether it's to the roads or just acknowledge. You're asking me to be an engineer and I won't try, but the health and safety concerns in moving the infrastructure.
yeah,
and some
broadly
common
speaking.
sense stuff. Don't put the water line like parallel to the
Right.
gathering line.
yeah,
That sort of thing.
exactly.
So we can, Jason, is that something you or a
Yes.
colleague at Waste Connections can think through for us?
Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Oil and gas lines and water distribution.
Well, they'll have,
That's,
they'll have.
that's a good
For sure.
question. Yeah,
That level of due diligence we can write into the recommendations I'm hearing. Okay. What else is,
For clarification purposes, because I've had people say to me, why can't we just deny the permit and make them close it? But in talking with Mark and Randy, my understanding is that wouldn't expedite closing of the landfill. It might reduce who is coming in there, but you would keep it open, same amount of time for Waste Connections to use. Am I correct in that? If we were to say blanket, no expansion, no nothing, just finish it up as quick as you can, there would be no change to your operation as far as having a sooner closing date than what you currently expect. So,
I think that's essentially true, although there'd be less.
Folks at home.
The incentive would be to focus on our own internal hauling operations and provide that outlet.
and
For those trucks.
I understand that. I'm just wanting it on the record for people who weren't a party to a conversation between the three of us when I asked you that, and you said, no, it wouldn't expedite a damn thing. It would still go out at least 20 years. Might change how we operate, but the length of operation would not change significantly.
That's right. We would look to change the volumes of waste coming into the landfill to preserve the life. That's exactly right.
Okay,
as
and
well.
I just wanted to be real clear on that because people say, well, why can't you? Because it really doesn't change anything. So the best thing to do is look what's best for everybody involved. So my second question to you guys then is, looking at these bike paths and stuff, I know you can't put a number on it, but what would the timeline be to begin to start seeing some of that on the western slope? Where we'd start to see some community benefit. I know you guys are concerned about what's going to happen on the east side too, but initially I would think the west, because most of it's already done. Once you relocate the entrance would be the first part filled in. What would be the timeline where you could realistically say we'd see some plantings in a bike path.
Well, let me, answer that, and let's process wise, you've worn me down. Let's table our an interactive exercise.
Didn't think it was possible.
Mark, I want to hear the answer to that. And then Jason, could you come and show us the champ slides? Or someone from Waste Connections, and that'll be an example of a landfill that Waste Connections owns and operates in the St. Louis area and some of the community benefits there. And then you're all gonna have a homework assignment to think about community benefits too. So what you're asking is, we're not, closing the landfill's not on the table. And then your question to Mark was.
It was segueing into the community
Yeah,
benefits thing.
the community,
I'm gonna
and the
I'm
phasing
gonna
of
do my
the west
best
side.
with this. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if Scott will be disappointed with me or not, because I can't give a
Oh,
hard
I've
number on this.
long time
So-
ago disappointed in you.
We're nice, we're
Thank
being
you.
nice.
So beyond the seeking all the approvals, the item that is on the critical path to closing out this area that I'm sort of circling here, which would enable us to finish out the western portion of the landfill, would be the relocation of the infrastructure here over to this proposed location closer to County Road 6. So I expect that if the town of Erie behaves and gets it through the building permit process and so on, that within a 3-year period, we can get all of that infrastructure moved. And then it's just a function of transitioning the operations from currently sort of, I'll call it the middle portion of the landfill, and moving it all to the west to close that out. And that would be a written commitment in our PD application on, this is the phasing. This is the path to complete the west northwest development, such that then we're in the position to put final cover on this west slope and put in a first phase, call it first phase trail system. And so that's something that we're quite happy to lay out in a narrative or combination of narrative and illustrative form to just follow through with those commitments. The timeline's difficult. I think it'd be a 5 to 10 year time horizon, to be honest, from today.
Because that's the other question I think we get is, when would I be able to start riding my bike over? It's not going to be next year.
As long as I'm the first, it would be,
But it depends on the moving the entrance.
yes,
Yeah.
the entrance,
Right.
and
I
Scott
understand
understands that.
right.
Okay.
I have a question. I don't know whether it just went over my head or what, but when are you going to start on the water tanks? Before, during, or after the entrance has been relocated and all that's been
That's a
done?
good question.
It's a great question. That's
Oh, okay.
that, because our development plan would not focus on that area for many years, then I think that we would be subject to the town of Erie's timeline is what I would say there, and their sense of urgency, and as a practical matter, how long it takes to complete the work. So I don't think that we would present a formal timeline. I think we'd look to the town and say, what do you think?
And I'll
Mainly
say that,
because that's town of Erie business and town of Erie budget, as opposed to Waste Connections on-site work.
So that could be simultaneous then?
Yes,
If the town says yes
could be.
and
Yeah.
Waste Connections
Um,
says yes?
but they would be two pretty distinct processes, but it could happen in the same.
So the town is paying for the relocation of the tanks?
Certainly not fully. There could be some question of if we want the tank changed from a 1.5 gallon, 1.5 million gallon to a 4 million gallon, there could be some incremental difference cost sharing. We haven't worked out all the details on this, but I'll say one thing's for sure. Water tanks haven't gotten any cheaper. And if we, I think it would be in our mutual interest to do that project sooner than later, just from a construction cost standpoint, but
We're definitely expecting to contribute. I just don't know how that will play out.
Could you, David, could you move to slide number 42, please? We're not coming full circle on this land use piece. We made good progress. Any other, and I want you all to see these slides of the community benefits so that you have that thing to think about when you do your homework assignment.
Went too fast.
But any other big picture things for the good of the group, good of the order, questions for Waste Connections around the kind of concept of moving the permitted boundary to the southeast there? It's okay if you do, we'll make time. But Michael, anything you wanted to ask? Or
No,
comment?
no additional questions.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, so Scott got us on the track of thinking about the community benefits on the west side and phasing, and we heard from Mark and on behalf of Waste Connections that it really depends on implementing some of these other recommendations. But we wanted you to think, this was in our slide deck from the last meeting and we didn't get around to it. So I'm determined to get to it at this meeting, but this is an example of community benefits built at well, I'll stop. Jason, go ahead. Yeah.
I think Mark's.
And
gonna
this is a
present 'em.
this is a landfill in operation, right? Still in operation, yeah.
Yeah, so this is a landfill that we own and operate in St. Louis, Missouri. It's called the Champ Landfill. I hope we don't come across here as a little bit self-serving, but the idea behind this is to perhaps stimulate some thoughts on community benefits that we implemented there that may be of value or may stimulate some thought here. But I think the other part to it is it's one thing to talk about community benefits, it's another thing to act on them and follow through. So Champ is a great example of that. So I'm just going to run through this quickly. So Champ Landfill is located on the west side of St. Louis. It is surrounded by all sorts of receptors. So the landfill footprint is in here. It's an active limestone quarry, and they actually move about 2 million tons of limestone out of this quarry every year. So we have to work around that sort of operation. Well, it's surrounded by a high school, Pattonville High School, a church, mega church, the city of Maryland Heights, I-70, a business park, an amphitheater, and other communities on the other side of 70. So we're pretty boxed in here. And so it's in some ways it's not unlike this facility where growth has occurred around it particularly over the last 10, 15 years. So we developed, much like we're working through the process here, developed a vision for this site. And so I'm briefly going to go through what this vision is, and it is to establish a sustainability campus. So I mentioned the school. Here is the school. An older portion of the landfill is directly next to the school. And the vision was to establish a sustainability center, which is sort of at a centerpiece of the current and future development of the site. So it's right next to the school with a trail that is already in place that connects to the school. We'd have some nurseries here, an apiary. There's an existing medium BTU energy plant. It delivers about 4.5 megawatts of renewable power to the grid today, and a future high BTU plant, which is being constructed as we speak to deliver renewable gas to a pipeline by the middle of next year. So this campus is a centerpiece to an array of different sustainability projects in partnership with the city of Maryland Heights. They share the building with us. So this is just an image. I'll go through this quickly. So this was an initial concept of the building. This is the ugly looking engineering drawings, but we get to live on this portion. This is Waste Connections have office space here. There's a big training center in the middle, and then the city of Maryland Heights are on the other side of the training center. So this is the built sustainability center with a couple of nurseries and the trail leading off to the high school. That's the building as it was, it had just been completed at that point. Here's the classroom. You guys saw this. I should give you a test. This is a gas well head right here. That's some training going on in the classroom. This is an apiary it's between us and the high school. We've got about 150,000 bees today. We're headed to 1 million around this time next year. And that's pretty adjacent to the 2 nurseries. These are the nurseries, so the students help us. Actually, they take the lead actually on doing some various plantings. They actually sell plants from this nursery that's powered from the landfill. This is some of our slope area with pollinator species. And so it just gives you a flavor of a little bit of what you can do on these facilities. Yes, the primary business is still taking the stuff that nobody wants, but it's an opportunity to do something valuable with it. And so that's the story of Champ. So hopefully it gives some people some ideas, and B, that we don't just talk about it, we actually
envision
do it.
something like that here?
Yes.
Where?
Yeah, so we've targeted a green shaded area here for a new office center, and quite possibly a proximal renewable energy plant up here in the north portion of the facility. I think the trail system is an absolute no-brainer connecting to the existing master plan. That's a personal passion of mine. And I think Randy hates bees. I'm a big bee person. So we're going to be selling garbage honey at Champ. This is not recorded, is it? So, but look, I mean, it's a big open space with lots of opportunities. And so I think this is an opportunity for the community to participate in some ideas and turning those ideas into reality. But it provides a great learning center too. So, yeah.
Can I make a recommendation as far as to keep in mind, because we are a historical mining community, our ancestors come from miners that are in this area. Could you keep that in mind with the architectural design of those buildings that are going to be available to the public, please?
I love that idea.
Thank you.
Love that.
Well, so any clarifying questions? That's a good thought, and I'll ask you to hold your thoughts for the work you get to do in between meetings. But any clarifying questions about the Champ landfill? And Sherry?
If anyone wants to come visit, we're really proud of it.
Are you going to pay for a field trip for all of us?
That might be questioned. I'm not sure we can pay for stuff, but
I'm always looking
you're
for
welcome to
parties.
come.
Sherry, did you have a question or comment?
Oh, I just want to make sure that I understand the difference maybe between Champ and the site location here is that facility, you had some land that was not the landfill cap where you could build on. I don't see that much available land here to do other than your office.
Yeah, there is less property to work with. There's quite a few acres up there in that north portion, though. Would you say 15 acres or so? Or is
Oh,
it-
at least, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, there's
Okay.
quite a bit of room there but we have a twinkle in the eye for a renewable energy plant
Right.
too. So that will consume some of that.
Right.
But we think that we could put in, a similar sort of training and office complex there as
Okay.
well. That would be along that roadway then to the entrance to the facility. So I think it would make
I
sense to
think
be
that's a good
co-located.
action item, though, if you, without committing, but an informal estimate of the acreage. I don't know, would that be helpful to know how much acreage you're thinking about potentially?
It
developing
doesn't
these
have
then?
to be on the landfill.
Could it be on the Denver?
Lisa, I stole Lisa's thunder.
No, I was going to ask that because, maybe it's something as we develop more of the area around Erie High School to include a learning lab
Yeah.
that might incorporate different ways to use things from the landfill. You know, I'm thinking of all,
That might be a better idea. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be here. We can help develop it, but it doesn't have to
Right.
be at the landfill. It may be better connected to a school or something else. Because
How-
the high school is just
Yeah.
literally up the road, right?
Yeah.
How big is that training area
Hours-
roughly? I mean, and do you make it available to community groups to use?
You can go to the blueprint.
Yes,
It'll
yeah,
give
we
you the-
do. So
See it.
Oh,
the city of Maryland Heights has, they in particular have invited a number of community groups to meet there. And so we make that available as long as, you know, they work through the city from a security standpoint in, that we don't use it just for our training, the city uses it as well. So, and I can give you a listing of all the various groups that use it, but it's quite popular.
Thank you, Mark. So what we'll do is I'd like to ask you all to think about questions you have for Waste Connections that would help you think about community benefits for this property within a week or so, and we'll write all this up. But that will give them a chance to answer those questions before our next meeting on October 1st. I also want you all to think about community benefits, and they can be long-term, they can be near-term, they can be high cost, low cost, high impact, low impact, feasible or not. Even the not feasible ideas are starting points. And I'm not hearing any reservations or any kind of limits on the ideas that we can have. And so we'll put on paper again some of the different filters you can think about your community benefit ideas. But, you know, even just in the couple minutes here, we've talked about kind of an ode to Erie's mining history, a renewable energy plant, a learning lab, and everything's on the table as a starting point. So this can be the fun part of this process and thinking about serving the community through Waste Connections' commitment to being a good neighbor and to supporting the community. At the next meeting, we'll circle back on the discussion around that expansion piece in the southeast part and the water tanks. If you do have other questions or comments, we will ask you to share those with us or with Waste Connections. But we'll look to finalize that at the next meeting as well. So with that, we will come to you within the next couple of days with a request to think about community benefits. And the questions are, they were on the screen. I have them here. Kind of what community benefits would you like to see? What's important to community members? What are larger system goals for community benefits? It doesn't need to be an apiary here, a training center there. It could be something to meet a community need. And just also thinking about phasing. If you were to prioritize some of your desired community benefits, how would you think about that? So we'll organize that into a formal request to the landfill task force. Any questions about that or reservations or more conversation you feel like we need to have before?
Is there a point that maybe we could talk together as a group to brainstorm some stuff as well?
So we have one more meeting on our calendar, kind of one more formal opportunity to come together. That's October 1st. And I would ask the group, would you all like to have an hour and a half meeting? It would be a virtual meeting to think about community benefits, or another option would be kind of a remote option of we compile everything and you can comment on the compiled version. What's your interest? Is it kind of brainstorming together?
Yeah, brainstorming, you know, for example, a sensory park. So little things like that as a personal request for the development for the
Let's
future.
get through the yes, I think there's value and I wanted to do that today. Let's get through the interim step of just getting your ideas on paper and then see where that takes us. And that's an exercise we could do at the next meeting too. I
Okay.
think that's a good use of time at the next meeting. If there is a desire to, you're all welcome to chat with each other in between meetings as well. I'm not hearing a strong desire to have a seventh kind of a meeting, 5B.
Yeah. No, but
Okay.
Three of you get together for coffee.
yeah.
So does that sound okay? Just asking you to do some work in between meetings. And if Cheryl, you you can reach folks too.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'll be reaching out to you guys.
Mhm.
I mean, and for the sake of not repeating ourselves as well, because
Yeah.
some of us might be thinking the same thing.
Mhm.
So,
So we'll ask you to send your community benefit ideas to us in between meetings. We'll do the work to compile everything, find themes, and do the work we do to move the conversation along, and then we'll come back at the next meeting and try to frame that in recommendations. And so in terms of action, that's the big action item. I see Randy with his hands up, but I feel like we made good progress in closing the loop on most of the land use pieces and on the entrance routes. And so the time we took for that served the group really well, and we'll be able to hit the ground running with community benefits at the next meeting. And Randy with closing thoughts. In the mic.
I have one homework question for everybody for our next meeting, which is October
1.
1. What would you like to eat? Pizza, sandwiches? What would you like?
So Waste Connections is offering dinner. So my suggestion would be dinner at 6. Come at your leisure if you would like a meal, and then we'll start our meeting at 6:30. Come hungry but not
Or-
angry. Yeah.
pizza's
Is
easy.
pizza good?
Yep.
I like pizza.
Thank you, Mike.
Join us, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you all for your time. This is, yeah, we appreciate it. Take care.
Question? Before